Welcome back to Oh and Another Thing. Your host, Vince Patrone. Bertram Beans, your producer, with us. Giovanna in studio today to give us her takes here and there. We have a great pod, a lot to talk about. Those of you joining us on YouTube, thank you for coming back for another Friday edition. Please go check us out on Spotify. Give us a subscribe, give us some shares, check us out over there. Never miss an episode of Oh and Another Thing. As I said, we have a great pod for you today. We're going to talk about all the headlines. There's a lot of them. We'll talk about the president's feud with Twitter, and we'll talk about what is going on in Minneapolis and really throughout the country today here on Oh and Another Thing. Again, we have a lot to talk about, so let's dive on in and start with some headlines. First here from, again, the Washington Post. Let's dive on in. Some 2.1 million Americans have filed jobless claims since last week, raising the total to over 40 million for the past 10 weeks. The House overwhelmingly passed a bill Thursday to make it easier for small businesses to use federal loans, but the Senate has yet to show any support for it or act as if they'll come back and vote on it. So for those of you keeping score at home, and for those of you who are worried about whether or not things will get done in this Senate, things are not going to get done in this Senate right now. Again, the House has passed a really substantial, pretty good bill that will help make getting money for small businesses a lot easier than it has been. It will make it so those funds in the Paycheck Protection Program are easier to access. Again, this is a House bill coming out of the House of Representatives. It has overwhelming bipartisan support, meaning support from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. And it's sad to say that it's probably going to end up on the dead pile on Mitch McConnell's desk because they don't feel it's necessary to pass any more bills or any more laws right now until things are settled out. The old don't do our jobs till things are normal again. We can't do anything about it plan from Senate Republicans again here, but hopefully that will find a way out of the House and into the Senate next week. President Trump is set to outline measures against China on Friday, whatever that means, as the political fallout over the novel coronavirus spurs a broader power struggle between Beijing and Washington on trade, finance, and the fate of Hong Kong. This probably will not, I want to say it will not be good, but oftentimes, as we've already seen this week, when the president takes a measure that he finds to be a total, all-encompassing, powerful move, a big look what we're doing this week kind of situation, or look what we're doing today to China, it's usually not that big a deal. Same thing with what we'll talk about here with the executive order he passed, or he signed into action yesterday in regards to Twitter and other social networks. We'll talk about that, but I reckon whatever the president announces here will just be some very loose hand-wringing that only leads to harsher implications from China and with the rest of the world. Because as we've seen, the president doesn't exactly take more than a half step on anything. So what he's going to do here is probably say something minor enough to make an impact and make some headlines, stir the pot enough with China. Sanctions, probably not. Restrictions on trade, maybe. Tariffs, maybe. But in the end, the only people that end up looking bad is the United States of America, because again, we're here putting restrictions and tariffs and whatever the president plans on doing in these measures against China he's going to outline today. Whatever that means, it's probably not the right time to do it during a pandemic, and people on the world stage will see that and say, what the hell is the United States doing anything with China right now? Shouldn't we be fighting this pandemic? Aren't there 1,000 other things going on in the United States right now instead of attacking China? That kid across the street's looking at me. So for some more behind the scenes for you guys, we have our windows for our apartment face the street, and we can see the windows across the street from us, and there's been these kids who look across the street and kind of look into our apartment kind of often. Right now they're looking inside right now, so we said hello to them. I waved, and Giovanna was like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to those kids? But they were looking over, so I said hi.
They were watching me do my video yesterday.
They watch us do our videos. They watch us make our...
For fresh content.
They want fresh content. That's all these kids want, and that's what we're giving them. Anyway, back to the news here. And speaking of the fate of Hong Kong, we know that in the original trade agreement made between the president and the Chinese, back whenever the trade agreement was reached, that the president agreed to not say anything in regard to the pro-democratic protest in Hong Kong, essentially not saying he would not give a word of support for a pro-democracy movement, something the United States would, common sense that United States Democratic Movement, that's our whole thing. In fact, so much so that the Hong Kong protesters played the Star Spangled Banner while they were protesting, carried American flags up and down the streets of Hong Kong. But yet, the president says to the leaders of China, to President Xi, that he will not say a word in support of these protesters as long as he gets the trade deal he's asking for. So who knows what the president's going to do against China in response to the coronavirus, which we know they probably didn't have that much to do with, aside from the fact that it originated from there, and they hid some numbers, and that wasn't great, and we shouldn't trust the Chinese government because of that. But I don't think the president foot-stomping and coming up with some kind of bullshit half plan to confront China is the best answer right now. Moving on. Twitter added fact-checking labels to several tweets by a Chinese government spokesman on the coronavirus. The same week, the U.S. company deployed similar measures against Trump. The president then tweeted that Twitter is doing nothing about all of the lies and propaganda being put out by China. He tweeted that on Friday. So what that is all about is the president... As you know, the president likes to get on the internet. So we all know the president likes to spend most of his day watching talk news and tweeting. Much like a grandparent with a cell phone, much like... Well, we don't watch cable news here, but I hang out on Twitter pretty much all day. People that aren't president can do these kinds of things. The president, however, cannot, and feels that he's entitled to, say whatever he wants to say. So we get this story because of that. The other morning didn't start out how normal mornings do for me. I wake up early. I get up at about it's whenever Bert starts screaming at us. Bert comes, he wakes us up for his first meal that we owe him. He tells us that we're, abandoning our duties, that here he is starving, and we lay in bed and let him perish and starve and go to wither and nothing. So then we eventually get up and we take care of him, even though he's not starving and has a full dish of dry food to get him through the rest of the morning. God forbid he eat that, but no, he needs his salmon pate to get his day started. Don't talk to Bert till he's had his goddamn salmon pate. Sorry, Bert. Anyway, so I go to the kitchen. I'm going through my news notifications on the way. Bert's screaming at me, and I get this text from my mom with a news story attached to it. One I missed. Usually I don't miss things. My mom's not the one telling me about the news, but she texted me this story about how the president threatened to turn off social media, how he threatened to regulate and all this stuff, and how he was going to shut off Twitter and shut off the social networks. And my mom, very concerned about this. My mom is someone who very much appreciates the First Amendment, very much appreciates her freedoms. Mom, don't get mad about this, but there were times whenever, growing up, my mom would say that we are the only country to have as much freedom as we do in the world. I know later on now that is not true. But however, it was a good point by my mom, and she really, really cares about this kind of stuff. So she was honestly worried about the president being able to shut down social networks and being able to go in and shut down social media. And I had to tell her, Mom, the president can't actually do that, despite what he believes and despite what people on the right-wing side of Twitter believe. The president can't, and it's pretty black and white here, the president can't pass a law or sign an executive order that limits free speech in any capacity, and he can't limit how businesses regulate free speech on their platforms. That's the bottom line in all of this. And obviously it's just another wild and crazy move by the president, who, as we have said before, really doesn't stand for anything aside from what is bugging him from TV that morning, or what little, petty difference he has found throughout the day. One that comes after he was personally inconvenienced. This one just happens to be one that came after he was personally inconvenienced and held accountable for breaking the rules. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like something we've seen a bunch of this week? So what started all this out was the president has been tweeting a lot of garbage lately, as we know, from Obamagate to going after Joe Scarborough to vote by mail. Earlier in the day, Trump had spent most of the day and most of the weekend, sorry, I'm not as articulate as I'd like to be today, spent a good portion of the early week tweeting various conspiracy theories and rehashing the death of a 28-year-old former staffer in an attempt to make people dislike Joe Scarborough or to get an investigation going into Joe Scarborough. There's no real understandable reason why the president would bring this up other than just to go after a technically political rival. I guess Joe Scarborough is not really in the actual political realm. He's a pundit, as you guys know, so he doesn't really have any control over anything the president does. All he does is, rightly criticize the president, so obviously the president has to go after him and accuse him of a murder that did not happen in 2001, and caused a lot of pain and anguish to the family of that staffer who just died in Joe Scarborough's office in 2001. So yeah, that's going on. So the president has been pushing that conspiracy theory, that false claim again against the member of the press. And then he moved on to talking about vote by mail and how there is no way, I'll quote it here, there's no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people. Anyone, and I don't have the second part of the tweet here, but anyway, so the president's tweet about vote by mail ended up getting flagged by Twitter as misinformation because there is no actual evidence that any of these things that the president cited has actually happened. So all Twitter did was go on and put a link to some facts about vote by mail, some truth to the story about it, and then the president went nuts. Various people, from the president himself to senators and congressfolks and celebrities and everybody, came out urging Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, to take steps to remove the president from Twitter, something that had been talked about before. We've never been in favor of removing the president from Twitter. I think removing the president from Twitter up until this week was kind of a crazy idea and really would have just added fuel to the right-wing conspiracy fodder that, right-wing voices are silenced on Twitter. That's what this whole president's whole thing is about here right now. He cites other Republicans saying that they think that social media companies are working against them and actively working to suppress the right-wing voice while microphoning or amplifying, there we go, that's the word, amplifying the voice of the left wing of society and all that. So I didn't think that taking the president off Twitter would be the best move to make and would probably just inspire more garbage to happen on Twitter, more people to type more garbage, more praise for the president. But now that we're to the point where he is using the platform to consistently spread misinformation and dangerous misinformation at that, and also to threaten people, which we'll talk about a little bit later on here today, Twitter has now taken the step to add a fact check button, which is enough. I don't think removing is a good idea. We'll get back to that right now. I don't think removing the president from Twitter is a great idea. It will still do the things I'm nervous it will do. The fact-checking is bad enough, obviously, as he has started to try to pass laws to limit freedom of speech now. So I don't think removing him completely is the answer. However, this is a very effective thing that Twitter is doing right now, because this does honestly make a big impact online. Because before, you could just, some idiot could scroll by one of the president's tweets, see it, and say, oh, well, that could be true, or, oh, well, president's saying it must be real, or I don't know how people justify trusting this current president we have now, so I don't know what goes through their heads whenever they agree with him. But I will say that adding this little check on the president leaves a mark on his tweets, granted, but it also does get the real news out there to people. It takes away the president's biggest tool that he had in 2016, and that is why the president is mad. He's mad the same way that Amy Cooper was mad at Christian Cooper last week for asking her to put her dog on a leash. He was asked to obey the same rules that everyone on Twitter is asked to follow. Everyone on Twitter and everyone on Facebook is asked to follow the same set of rules, same set of principles, same set of guidelines, that you will not use the platform to promote hate speech, to promote violence, to... I've never personally agreed to not go after Joe Scarborough on Twitter and accuse him of murder, but that's one of the things they also said that you're not supposed to do, is accuse people of crimes they haven't committed on Twitter. I know oftentimes people do get carried away and say things that aren't always 100% true on Twitter, but we'll step away from that for now. But there is just a standard moral code that we should all abide by, especially the president. And now that we are in a place where the president has been held accountable for his lies and his rules breaking by a private company, he's going nuts. And this is where the constitutional issue comes in here. Obviously, up until this point, I wouldn't give a shit because, again, I don't think the president does anything of substantial value, at least this president. He's really good at inspiring hate. He's really good at getting people to do terrible things and really good at strengthening an amount of tyrannical power that a president has never had before. He's gotten very good at that and very good at finding lawyers that will fight for him to have these sweeping rights as the president. Again, only things to benefit himself. But as soon as the president starts thinking that he has the ability to regulate a private company's use of free speech on their platform, that is where he goes absolutely a step too far. And at some point, he will lose members of his base for this, I hope. I know there are people that will not leave his side no matter what. But like I said, there are people that honestly do give a shit about their constitutional values, people that do understand how the First Amendment works and the difference between the government patrolling free speech and a company patrolling free speech. So the First Amendment is pretty clear. The government can't pass any law regulating how speech is used. They personally cannot do that. However, private companies can set guidelines that say you can't do such and such on their platform. And laws have been passed protecting social networks, Facebook, Twitter, places like that, MySpace, I don't know what else people use anymore, that protect those sites from being liable in a lawsuit about false information or something untrue being spread on their website. So what the president did yesterday was sign an executive order that allows for him essentially to start suing Twitter and people on Twitter and Facebook for pushing false information or information that he says is untrue about him. It's crazy because it is an absolute violation of a business's right to run itself and regulate itself freely, which should be an issue for Republicans, as that is one of their major standpoints, is that corporations are no different than private citizens. So if you can't regulate a private citizen, you can't regulate a corporation's use of free speech either. So the president is going directly against another one of the Republican Party's principles and against another one of the American Party's principles. If you want to talk about America, it's one of our founding principles. He's going directly against it because he has a tiny little personal grievance with Twitter right now holding him accountable. What is worth noting in this story is that though the government cannot censor or limit speech, Facebook and Twitter can. The president isn't fighting this fight so that we will be able to be allowed to say anything we want online without repercussions. He doesn't care about memes being taken down from other people's accounts. This isn't about all of us online. It's about him. It's about the OANs and the Breitbarts of the world. It's about the Mike at Mike4958764367889s of the Russian bot community. This isn't about the American people being able to exercise more freedom of speech online. It's about people that want to help Donald Trump get reelected benefit from free speech online. The president says it himself in one of these tweets that his follower count has gone down and that censorship is happening more and more to the right-wing Twitter accounts. I hope we all stop now and wonder why right-wing Twitter gets more regulated, or looks like it gets more regulated more than a left-wing Twitter account does. And no, it isn't about liberal media bias. It isn't about libs controlling the web. It's all about the fact that right-wing accounts, and there's articles and research to back this up, spread more misinformation more often and at a higher rate than left-wing accounts do, which helps Trump greatly. Absolutely greatly, because if people in his circle, people that follow Republican circles, are spreading misinformation, riling up a Republican base to go turn out and vote, using lies to do it, they are robbing the American people of true, free, and fair election. And that is what the president's plan is always to do. What he cares about is the fact that the tool that helped him more than anything in 2016 is being taken away or limited by Twitter right now. By them putting this fact check on his tweet, he can no longer just say and do whatever he wants and create a media storm around the thing he said. Instead, the media storm becomes around the false thing he said and the reality behind the tweet, the reality he is trying to hide. The president's greatest tool is being taken away, and that is what makes him so upset. There is no repercussion long term for the American people from this. Things will get changed back to normal. Or back to how it should be, at least, where private companies can monitor their own platforms. And honestly, I think they should do more monitoring of their platforms, because we know what happens on Facebook. We've all been on Facebook and seen what Facebook looks like. But yet Mark Zuckerberg doesn't think it's his place to censor his social network. He went on TV and said so last night, supporting the president's stance, because Mark Zuckerberg is the fucking worst. And it shows itself literally all the time. That Aaron Sorkin movie was absolutely garbage. Mark Zuckerberg isn't a genius. Mark Zuckerberg's just a really manipulative guy that got lucky. There's a difference. There's an absolute difference between being a genius and a manipulative guy that gets lucky, I think.
Did you see that article they put up after that said Mark Zuckerberg dead at 30?
I did see that, because then everybody started making the false news. There's another one about him. Someone called him a pedophile. Someone said child predator. Mark Zuckerberg says.
The point that if you say it shouldn't be regulated, like, here you go.
Here you go. Here's your unregulated internet, Mark Zuckerberg. Enjoy. Anyway, all that's happening, and bear in mind the president is doing all of this, going after Twitter, going after social network companies, trying to hold him and his base accountable, taking away his biggest tool, misinformation on the web. He cares about this more than he cares about the American people he's supposed to be governing. It's shown itself on two fronts this week. The president issued one tweet. Out of all the tweets he's issued, in condolence of the plus 100,000 plus people, plus Americans who have died from the coronavirus. One tweet. He followed that tweet up not long after by attacking China. He doesn't care what happens to Americans from the coronavirus. And he certainly doesn't care he doesn't care about what's happening in Minneapolis. He doesn't care about what happened in Central Park. He doesn't care about what has been happening around the country. He doesn't care what happened in Georgia a couple weeks ago with Ahmaud Arbery. He doesn't care about the things that are happening in this country right now, unless he can find a way to get attention from it, find a way to push his narrative forward. That's why this morning we saw the president take to Twitter and tweet. And I hate that we're talking so much about the president's Twitter on this show, but he is on this podcast, but we talk about it a lot generally anyway, but I'll digress from that. He tweeted this morning, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." And I would like for everybody listening today to find a Republican senator on Twitter, find a Republican House member on Twitter, and ask them if they agree that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Because let me tell you what that means. That means that once the black people protesting the murder of George Floyd, once the protesters protesting the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, once the protesters protesting the unnecessary use of force, murder against black people by police on a nearly daily basis in this country, he is saying that it is okay to use military force in the United States against United States citizens. In fact, he went and he threatened those protesters again not long after, in the very same morning, this morning, saying that he had the National Guard in Minneapolis ready to go, and that he wouldn't let the memory of George Floyd go in vain or something like that, in some way manipulating the murder of George Floyd to instigate military violence against protesters in this country. Something he would not have done and did not do for the protesters that stormed, took captive of, held hostage of lawmakers in state capitals just a few weeks ago by protesters with automatic rifles, guns, knives, grenades, military equipment, things, flak jackets, things to stop bullets from penetrating them, real military-grade equipment. But when it comes to protesters with a righteous cause, a real righteous cause, not just a fucking haircut or a 2 for $20 entree, when it comes to that, that's whenever we get out there rubber bullets. Whenever someone wants to protest the use of murder against a black man, that's whenever the tear gas comes out. That's when the rubber bullets come out. You haven't been living under a rock. If you have, welcome to the new hell that we call normal. In this new hell, we have a rising death toll. New rules for how we all must act in public. Rules enforced on a per-case basis, and you know what this means. An executive branch doing everything it can to interfere with the reality of the coronavirus to protect itself. Skyrocketing unemployment, meat shortages, rising inflation, as well as a lack of morality that has been staggering to see. Sorry for being bleak, but that is how things really are right now. Again, welcome from under that rock if you were under it. We've all watched armed protesters, spurred on by their president's words and personal actions, storm state capitals. Again, armed with military-grade assault weapons, grenades, knives, you name it, they had it. They stormed state capitals and held governing institutions hostage with military-grade weapons screaming and berating police officers and security members at those state capitals for about 2 weeks straight because these people couldn't get a fucking haircut, because they couldn't go get $5 margaritas with the girls, because they had to eat chicken fingers at home with their kids, because they've been inconvenienced in the smallest way possible. They call the police whenever you ask them to do something. We'll get to that in a second here. All of this happened. All of this militia-style, guerrilla war, tactical garbage happening in the streets of the United States happened, and not one intervention. Not one intervention from the federal government. Not one intervention from the National Guard. Not one arrest. Not one person dragged through the streets. Not one person beat with a club. All of that is to say that all of that proves that these people were allowed to go a mere few weeks ago. And again, take a state capital hostage, essentially. Threaten the people inside with, again, military violence, with military-style weapons. And not one thing was done, but yet, once people feel that there is a justified reason to go out and protest, and there is a justified reason to go out and protest the, again, murder of an unarmed black man, again, in this country, those people are the ones that the harshest tactics are reserved for. The people that feel the most disenfranchised, the people that are the most disenfranchised, the people that are and have the most reason to feel actually angry about something, the fact that every time something happens in this country, it finds a way to manifest and show the breakdown and the inequalities of this country. There is absolute evidence now that not only does the coronavirus kill and affect poor, black, Latino communities more than it affects rich, white, affluent communities. There is proof of that, but also proof that one side's allowed to protest more than the other. That one side is allowed to be angry while the other is not, and that is why you see these fires in Minneapolis. That is why you see these people attacking police vehicles in Denver. This is why you see people, protesting in a way that you might not necessarily see as peaceful. But I don't think there's a problem with it, because for so long people have said, well, peace is the answer. Well, peace is the answer. If we just keep going on and we keep pushing on, why? Why does it seem that every time someone acts with violence against a black person, a white person, a white cop, a white woman, Amy Cooper, anytime somebody has any bit of vitriol toward a black person, any kind of violence shown toward them, it's fine. They felt threatened. Well, this person was doing this person was doing that. George Floyd had the cops called in on him for a counterfeit bill. I don't give a fuck anymore, because guess what? We get counterfeit bills all the time at my work. I work in a coffee shop. I've never once called the fucking police over a counterfeit bill, because it's stupid to do, and the only reason you do something like that is because you know that there are serious repercussions behind it for the person who gave you that counterfeit bill. There is an unfairness in society that people are finally sick of. There's an inequality that is glaring and showing itself more and more by the day. So excuse these people for finally deciding that they have had enough, that enough is enough, and that if you want to be violent toward them, they can be violent right back, and they have every right to be. It's not, I think there's a Malcolm X quote that says, it's not violence if it's in self-defense, and this is self-defense, something like that. We're at a point where this is self-defense for poor communities and black communities in this country. Every time something happens to them, white folks on Facebook, white folks in the news, white folks in government, look for a reason to justify the killing of a black person, to justify the oppression of black people, of minorities and people in this country. Every time they go searching for a reason. And then they search for a reason why it shouldn't have happened to that person. Why, well, we shouldn't have called the cops on Christian Cooper. He went to Harvard. He's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what degrees a person has. It doesn't matter what occupation a person has. It doesn't matter how much money a person has. Because these are all still people, regardless of where they stand in society, and they are all still targeted to the same rate as everybody else in that society because of who they are. It doesn't matter that Christian Cooper was a bird watcher and he went to Harvard. Okay, if someone who didn't go to college or graduated from SUNY Purchase had a degree in advertising, degree in advertising. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. And asked Amy Cooper to put her dog on a leash. She should still put her dog on a leash. If a high school graduate on their way home from working at the subway ran into Amy Cooper in the park and they were trying to enjoy some bird watching, and they asked her to put a leash on her dog, she should have had to fucking listen anyway. It doesn't matter where Christian Cooper went to school. What mattered to Amy Cooper and what matters to these white people that are all up in arms because Minneapolis is burning, and how can these people do this, and how can you ask me to do this whenever you won't do this? All this double standard bullshit comes from the same thing. It comes from the racism that people have deep down inside them. We keep trying to say America's not racist anymore. America's not racist. We've come a long way. Well, apparently we have not, because to this day, I can still log into my Facebook, and after people see video evidence, real footage of 4 police officers, one holding a man down, one with his knee on a man's neck while he screams he can't breathe, and another watching on. That's 4 murderers. And each one of those murderers, someone has come up with a reason for them to be doing what they are doing. And that is such bullshit, because you wouldn't do that for a white person. You wouldn't call the police on a white person for a counterfeit dollar bill. You wouldn't call the police for a white person asking you to put a dog on a leash. You only do this whenever you feel threatened, and you only feel threatened because someone doesn't look like you. And that is what it comes down to anymore with a lot of these people. And it is sickening to see. Every day this happens. Every day there's an inequality shown in our system. And if it's not, Christian Cooper got lucky that the person on the other end of that phone call with Amy Cooper ignored her, because they could tell that she was crazy. They could tell that she was just an unhinged white woman looking to get someone in trouble. Lucky for Christian Cooper, because he could have ended up, and Amy Cooper may well have wanted him to end up the same way. I don't want to put that on her, but it's very possible that she had an idea that he could possibly end up the same way that George Floyd ended up. All because someone called the cops over a phony dollar bill. The consequence, Amy Cooper and every other person who has called the police on a black person over a minor offense or even a simple request that if a white person had done or made, the case would have been c'est la vie. All fueled by racism and a white superiority complex that this land is my land, and if you try to change that, you will get killed. It is the same thing that creates the different response to different protests and causes. When a group of white folks show up, again, armed like they are, replaying the Battle of fucking Fallujah, because they can't go eat fast casual how they'd like, it is all fine and normal. These are just people who feel like their rights have been violated. You're taking away their personal freedoms. You guys can't make these people stay inside. They have a right to go out. Come on, they want to get a haircut. They want to get their bad dye job. Their roots are showing. But it's fine because they are who they are. They are the white mass. The white masses, if you will. But when unarmed peaceful protesters respond to protest the murder of an innocent man, at the hands of police officers, to call awareness to a reality that faces a number of minority communities in this country, they get tear gas, rubber bullets, and end up with a face full of milk. So what? A target got burned. They have insurance, a website, locations nationwide. George Floyd does not have an insurance plan that will pay to rebuild him, probably bigger and more extravagant with more space to store than ever before. The Floyd family will not get their father back. You cannot rebuild a man. You cannot restock the shelves of that life. George Floyd won't come back to life once there is a vaccine for coronavirus. And there is no vaccine also for the real plague of what's going on right now, and that is the inequalities in our system. These people have a right to riot, and we're forced to do so. Wouldn't you be a little upset if you were also being hunted constantly? There's a quote that, and we'll go back to the present here to end things on. There's a quote from Anthony Imperial. Anthony Imperial was a white vigilante in Newark in the 1960s. For those of you not familiar, in Newark in the 1960s, I think it was 1968, maybe a little earlier, there were the Newark riots. I don't remember what caused the Newark riots, but there was a quote from Anthony Imperial, this white vigilante in Newark, who said, "Once the Black Panthers come to town, the white hunter will be ready. The white hunter will be ready." And Donald Trump this morning sounded a lot like the white hunter who will be ready. And I think that goes to show. A lot about the man that is Donald Trump and a lot about the people that support him. Things we already knew. But things that get shown to us more and more every day. And it makes me wonder more and more every day how 42% of people can approve of this guy's job. How 42% of Americans can see a man tweeting like a literal white supremacist, like a literal white vigilante who threatened to kill black people back in the 60s. Like an old fucking Dixiecrat. And think things are okay. Think that this is a man with the right intentions for a large community of people. I know we all got mad at Joe Biden last week for saying if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. And maybe it's not my place to say this, but if you have a president who's literally threatening to kill protesters, use the same tactics that the National Guard used to kill black people in cities across the world during the 60s, during protests, during what they characterized as riots, and maybe there's a point there. And I know that's not my place, and I shouldn't probably say that, but I think it is true also. It's so clear that there is one aspect to Donald Trump's ecosphere that he cares about, and it is the rich white base that supports him, and he will not do anything, and the people that support him will not do anything to change any of these problems. So that is why I think it is fine for protesters, for these communities to react the way they are with the violence that they have, because they've had nothing but violence shown toward them and nothing but double standards shown toward them since the beginning of time. And I think it's time for that to stop. And if they have to use violence and fire and break in some police cars to do it, fuck it, go ahead. Thank you for listening to and another thing. We had a great... before we close it up, we have to talk about Amy Klobuchar, because she's involved in all this. Okay, so we've talked on here before about the vice presidential... the race to be Joe Biden's VP. It's a tight race, you could say. We have Kamala Harris. People say she's at the top. Klobuchar at number 2. For a while, they said that's hopefully changing now. Warren at 3, and I believe Stacey Abrams at 4. I believe that was the power rankings on the post this morning. When I looked, 3 and 4 could be flopped. However, I think it's time for us to change those power rankings, because a story yesterday came out about Amy Klobuchar whenever she was she the district attorney at the time?
I think it was county commissioner. Either way, she had some sort of say over who was prosecuted.
There was an opportunity for Amy Klobuchar to essentially have the man who killed George Floyd taken out of the police force permanently. Years ago, there was a complaint made about him, a case ongoing, and she decided not to prosecute the case or have the case prosecuted. And for someone who has been talked about being possibly the best option to capture the Midwest vote, I say fuck that, Amy Klobuchar. You can stay home now. We don't want you on the ticket. Amy Klobuchar would be poison for Joe Biden's ticket. So Klobuchar obviously out of the race now, and I think that changes things drastically. I think this whole situation changes things absolutely drastically. You can look and say Kamala Harris now. I don't want to make this too political, because obviously this isn't a fully political issue. There's a real situation and real violence and real lives at stake and real problems and inequalities facing the country. So maybe who's the next vice president isn't the biggest deal, and who Joe Biden chooses to be as vice president isn't the biggest deal, but it's in the news, so we should talk about it. I think Kamala Harris definitely still has a leg up on everybody. I wonder if Kamala Harris having her record as district attorney in California, the record that has her putting away a lot of low-level drug offenders, though she would be the leading black woman on the ticket, since Biden put himself in that having a woman corner, that might play against her now, since there is going to be more scrutiny toward people's record on police reform, on criminal reform, but also that doesn't sway well for Joe Biden either necessarily, being that he has his own voting past, and of course we're talking about the busing issue that Kamala Harris pointed out in their first debate way back when. Does this strengthen the case for Stacey Abrams? No, I don't think so. Does it strengthen the case for Elizabeth Warren? No, I don't think so. Gretchen Whitmer? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's case is necessarily strengthened by this. Kamala Harris might get a little bit more of a leg up. But otherwise, all this means is that Amy Klobuchar can't be vice president, And Amy Klobuchar really has a lot of explaining to do now. Because Amy Klobuchar has been trying to sell herself as something for the past year so she can be president, that she's going to have a lot to answer for here in the coming weeks and coming days. So good luck to Amy Klobuchar. Good luck to Amy Klobuchar. Good luck to all the people protesting. I hope you guys live through the night. I'm really nervous for you.
Remind everybody that if they are going to protest, to turn off their cellular data, to cover any tattoos or anything that you can be identified with, and to people to not retweet photos or videos of protesters.
Okay, I don't know if you guys caught that or not because Giovanna is far away from the microphone, but she is saying that you should hide all body markings, turn off your cellular data. This is if you are going to protest tonight. Turn off your cellular data, cover all markings, do not share.
And for people on Twitter, do not share photos of protesters.
Do not share protesters' photos, anything like that. Oh shit, there's so much to talk about here. I feel like we can't close the show because then we also have to talk about what happened with CNN, with the news reporter. I know it's not the biggest deal, but do not forget that these cops are now starting to round up news reporters, people that had cameras. CNN's obviously there. They had a reporter on the ground who got arrested by the police. A black news reporter, a black man doing his job, reporting the news, and he gets arrested by the same police. Omar Jimenez?
Yes.
From CNN?
Yep.
Yeah, Omar Jimenez, my man. I like Omar. Got a good way about him. Yeah, I think he's the guy I think who was in a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago now, whenever coronavirus first started. He was one who they sent to the epicenter. He was one of that hospital who looked like he was visibly ill, but I think that was him. Anyway, so some shit is going down. The president doesn't have the right things on his mind. We don't have a lot that we can do. Please go out and make your voice heard. Act how you want to act. They act with violence. We can act with violence too. Wild things. Wild country to be living in. Good luck to everybody. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday with more. Oh, and another thing. Enjoy your weekend.